You know what, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And if other folks are able to join us, then we will welcome them in when they're here. So you are hopefully in the right place. We have 4 things going on at once here. So this is an introduction to the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School Self-Evaluation Tools. I'm going to start by introducing myself here. So I am Christy Bakke. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Curriculum and Professional Development Coordinator for the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School Program. And so I'm super happy that you're here with us in this session, and also that you're here with us at the gathering. So I hope that this gathering has been a little bit of an opportunity for you to learn about our OSU Extension Service Outdoor School Program, in addition to all of the networking and other professional learning that you're doing. Because I'm actually going to start this presentation with the mission of our team, just to kind of provide some context for the self-evaluation tools and what we're going to talk about the rest of the time. And so our mission is that together we guide and support equitable, culturally responsive, and interdisciplinary outdoor school programs for Oregon's youth. And we use the words guide and support because we don't actually deliver outdoor school programming. And so one of our big avenues towards working towards our mission is to support outdoor school educators and outdoor school providers in making outdoor school more equitable, culturally responsive, and interdisciplinary. And so, you know, we're always encouraging folks to do this, to center equity in their programs. And, you know, just as something that you'll probably hear us say a lot. The more you interact with us, the more you'll hear us say it. But what does that actually look like? And so we created this suite of tools. Here we go. And I'm going to introduce these individually in a moment. But basically, we created these 3 tools to support programs in actually reflecting on where they are now, and then figuring out where they want to go and how they might get there. So basically, these tools take big ideas about equity and inclusion, and they break them down into some smaller components that are a little bit easier to manage. And so I want to stress that, you know, evaluation is here in the title, but these are not evaluation in the sense of grading something. They're meant to really help programs learn and grow. And so they're really designed to help folks move through the evaluation cycle. And so I'm going to explain quickly what that is. So the evaluation cycle is basically a model for using evaluation as part of growth and improvement. So, you know, before I started, you know, getting involved in thinking explicitly about the evaluation cycle and what cycles of improvement look like, when I heard the word evaluation, I thought of like a test or a grade. And so this model really is about thinking of evaluation as being about learning and not about grading. And so it has the one that we're using, this is kind of a simplified version of an evaluation cycle, has 3 steps. The first one is sort of what we often think of as evaluation. It's the part where we're sort of looking at what are we already doing. So monitoring our existing activities, evaluating them. Then we move into the second phase of the cycle, which is where we reflect, connect, learn, and plan. So what can we learn from our monitoring and evaluating that we did in the first step? And then how can we sort of grow and develop in those areas so that we can move to this third phase, which is apply, improve, and instruct. And so that's where we actually go out and do the work of, okay, we looked at where we were now, we figured out where we wanted to go, we learned what we needed to learn, and now we're going to try to actually put that into action. And then, of course, it's a cycle. So it's an iterative process that just sort of can repeat itself. And equity is here in the center because it's kind of a core value that can drive every step of this cycle. So we can think about equity when we're in phase 1, consider, monitor, evaluate. We can think about equity as being central to what we're learning, what we're planning. And then we can think about, okay, what's the role of equity in the actual actions that we're taking? And so I want to sort of stress again that we're talking about evaluation for learning. So evaluation that leads to reflection and then leads to implementation and some sort of growth, not talking about evaluation to sort of report performance. And I'm really stressing that because we want folks to engage in this self-evaluation work, knowing that there's nothing punitive coming from the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School team related to the use of these tools. So funding for outdoor school is not in any way connected to how people use the tools, to what they learn about their programs while using the tools. So I would just want to make that super crystal clear. And so the self-evaluation tools that I'm going to explain to you here in a second are really meant to help programs move through this cycle. And so we could honestly spend like hours talking about each one of these three tools, and we have 45 minutes to talk about all three. So this is going to be sort of a very, very shortened tour of the documents. And so you're not going to walk out of here, feeling like an expert who's ready to use these. But what I'm hoping is that you walk out of here or leave here having some sense for how these documents are set up so that you're able to go back to them later and not feel totally overwhelmed by them. So I'm going to start with the cultural responsiveness self-evaluation tool. And you will often hear us call these by their acronyms. So CURSET is how we say this one, cultural responsiveness self-evaluation tool. And this one is designed to support outdoor school programs in becoming more culturally responsive, as the name would suggest. So in other words, it's about how do we structure and run our programs so that we're promoting equity and we're centering and uplifting our students' cultures, identities, and contexts in our programming. The second tool I will introduce here briefly is the Special Education and Accessibility Self-Evaluation Tool, or the CSET. And this one is designed to support outdoor school programs in becoming more inclusive and accessible, specifically for students with exceptional needs. And so this has a lot to do with how we ensure that students with disabilities are fully included in outdoor school programs. And often this requires, for schools or districts that use outdoor school providers, this requires a lot of collaboration between the outdoor school provider and the special education staff at the school. So this is sort of included in the CSET. And then finally, this is the one that's been out the longest. So if you're familiar with one, this may be it. This is our instructional resource self-evaluation tool, which is designed to support outdoor school programs in developing and or improving their instructional resources and curriculum. So sort of depending on where folks are with, if they have an existing curriculum that they're looking to improve, or they're just sort of starting out. And so this tool is at a different scale than the other two. So the cultural responsiveness self-evaluation tool, or the CURSET, and the special education and accessibility self-evaluation tool, or the CSET, those are really for looking at programs as a whole. Whereas the instructional resource self-evaluation tool is at this finer scale. It's looking at the instructional resources and the curriculum specifically. So just as you're maybe exploring the tools after this, just keep in mind that this instructional resource one is looking at one particular component of what's happening in a program, whereas the other two are looking at sort of that broader, bigger picture scale. And so even though they all have different purposes, so all three tools were designed for a different purpose, they all follow the same structure, which we did on purpose to try to make them as easy as possible to use. And so I'm going to actually walk you through that structure, because it can be a little bit overwhelming if you just open the document and you aren't quite sure what is what. So I'm going to go ahead and walk us through what that structure looks like. And I'm going to use this instructional resource self-evaluation tool as an example. But as I said, all three tools are going to follow the same structure. So please don't try to read what I'm going to put on the slide. This is strictly an illustration of what the beginning of the documents look like. So it starts with an introduction with some instructions and some tips for use. And then it also sort of goes through that evaluation cycle that I was mentioning earlier. And so this is just sort of the front matter of the documents. And then after this piece, we sort of get into the actual tool itself. And so the part that I'm about to go into is this piece that's really focused on this first phase of the evaluation cycle. So this is where in the tool, we're trying to support people in doing this consider, monitor, and evaluate piece, whichever tool they happen to be using of the three. And so all three tools have the same organization of this section. So the first thing is that it's organized each one into 3 themes. So themes are like the biggest buckets of topics. And so for the instructional resource self-evaluation tool, or IRSET, the 3 themes are context and setting for learning, content and integration, and instruction and pedagogy. And then each one of these themes, these big buckets, is broken down into characteristics. So here I'm showing characteristics that fall under this context and setting for learning theme. So you can see there are 5 of them here: promote stimulating and responsive environment, centers community experiences and perspectives, etc. Okay, so we start with the themes at the biggest scale, then those themes are broken down into characteristics, and then the characteristics are broken down into what we call qualifiers. So this is actually a screenshot from the document. So this is what it actually looks like. And so basically I've taken one of the characteristics from the previous slide. So respectfully includes Indigenous experiences and relationships to land. And it provides, a little bit of a description of that. You'll notice that there are asterisks on some words. That means that the terms are found in an online glossary, which you can access from the self-evaluation tools webpage, which I'm going to take us on a tour of. And then each characteristic, so here's our characteristic, is qualified as absent, emerging, or highly effective. And these bullets in here, these bullet points, are meant to sort of provide some idea of what it might look like if this characteristic is absent, emerging, or highly effective. And so typically what happens is an individual, or more often teams, will go through and characteristic, think about, okay, is this absent, emerging, or highly effective in our program if you're using the cultural responsiveness tool or the special education and accessibility tool, or in our instructional resource or curriculum if you're using the instructional resource tool. And different people on the team, some might say, I think this is highly effective in our curriculum, and someone else might say it's emerging. And that's okay, because you're going to have these deep, rich conversations that come out of people having different ideas about where your organization might fall within these qualifiers. And then finally, there's a box over here for marking down evidence for the way that you qualified that characteristic. And so this same structure is then repeated for every single characteristic. So as I showed on the last slide, there are 5 characteristics within the first theme of the instructional resource self-evaluation tool. So there are basically 5 boxes that look like this, one row for each of the characteristics. And so this is the same structure for all 3 tools. And after that piece of it, which is, as I mentioned before, this first phase of the evaluation cycle, the document moves into, okay, what does this second phase of the evaluation cycle look like? This reflect, connect, learn, and plan. And so I'm going to again stick to using the IRSET as an example for these, but know that the structure is the same for all 3 of the documents. So first up, we have a report page. And this is basically a place that you can take from all of the different, there's multiple pages to fit all the characteristics and the qualifiers within every theme. And so it can be kind of hard if you're trying to flip the pages to sort of get that big picture view of your program. And so this page can be helpful for that. And for the instructional resource self-evaluation tool, something that this page can be really helpful with is if you're using the tool to look at a bunch of different individual instructional resources, so a bunch of lesson plans or your field studies or the lyrics of the songs that you sing at the campfire, whatever the instructional resource might be, you can take all of those instructional resources and mark them on this same report sheet, how you qualified them, so that you can start to see, okay, we're hitting highly effective for promote stimulating and responsive learning environment on almost all of our instructional resources, but we are absent on almost all of them for ecologically and seasonally appropriate. That's just examples. But so it helps you to sort of get that big picture view of all of the characteristics. And so then after this report page, we have a celebration page. So this is about looking at what are things that we're doing really well. And, part of the reason that we have this page is because a lot of the things that you're doing well in your program are not just going well by accident. There are things that you're doing or structures that you have in place, assets that you have within your staff or within your community network that are making those successes possible. And so let's actually reflect on those and think about how do we maintain the strengths that we have. So for example, if you have one staff person who has a super strong relationship, what happens when that staff person leaves? So what actions could we take to make sure that we maintain these strengths? And then how do we build off of those and expand? And then the next page after this is also a reflection and is more focused on those areas for improvement. But this too has you thinking about, okay, what assets do we have, within our staff or within our community that could help us, implement an action plan to improve one of these areas that we've selected. And so we often like to say that it's better to make good progress on one or two characteristics than to make no progress on a lot of characteristics. And so it can be kind of hard, after you use the table part of the tool to constrain and be like, okay, we're going to pick this thing as a focus area because, of course, we all want to be making as many improvements as we can all the time. But we encourage you to sort of be realistic about what it is that you might be able to do so that you can actually make that progress that you want to see. And then finally, there is an action plan. And so this is where you can say, okay, we're going to target this characteristic or maybe these two characteristics. And what do we actually need to do? This is, of course, just a sketch of what a full action plan might look like. You might do much more detail within your team. But what are sort of the key actions that need to happen to help us make this improvement? And who's going to be responsible for that? And sort of when are we going to do it? And so after you do this, basically, then you're moving into the third phase of the evaluation cycle, where you go out into the world, into your community, into schools, whatever it might be, and you actually try to make that action plan happen. So you apply what you learned, you make improvements, and actually make that change within the community. And so that was like the super fly overview of what the self-evaluation tools, how they're organized and sort of what they were designed for. And so I want to just take about 5 minutes. Rita placed the links into the chat for the tools. And you can go up to about 10:08 in the chat and you can see, just pick one, open it up and take a look around, sort of get yourself oriented. I'm going to set a timer because it's so hard when everyone is just sitting silently on a Zoom call to estimate how long it has been. And so just take about 5 minutes. You're welcome to turn your cameras off, turn away from the computer for about 5 minutes and explore. If you have any questions or things that you notice that you want to hear more about, please bring those questions and thoughts back here to the group so that we can talk about them. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 5 minutes and let you do a little bit of exploration of the tools. So no way you'll be able to look really through all 3 of them. Just pick one and try to sort of understand the lay of the document. And we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes. Great. Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your super quick little run into the tools. So I'd like to first highlight a question that was asked in the chat, and then open up both the chat, or we have a pretty small group. So if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, that will work too. Rita had mentioned in the chat. So Rita is my staff host. Rita, give a wave. So Rita works with me here on the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School team. And she put into the chat a note that we are able to send printed copies of the self-evaluation tools out to folks. And so then there was a follow-up question about whether we can send multiple copies if folks want to give them to their board members or like use the printed copies with their staff. And the answer is yes. So please contact us. Rita has pasted our team email address and my email address into the chat. We're more than happy to send these to you. We tend to not keep a super big stock of them on hand because we really think of these as living documents. And so they are always up for being edited and revised as we get feedback as people are using them. And so as much as you can give us a little bit of advance notice, we're more than happy to get as many printed as you need. But we don't always have huge stacks of them just laying around. All right.
Printed mail is pretty fast, so they can make them for us and send them straight out.
Yeah, cool, great. Excellent. All right, so does anyone have any questions or comments they'd like to ask or share after having just that super quick 5 minutes to take a look at the tools?
This is John Yoder, and I'll ask a question first. We have used the tool for our program and found it very helpful. We had a little confusion early on as to whether this is an evaluation for a single curriculum lesson or whether it's an evaluation for a program. So we had about 12 to 13 lessons that we looked at, and we ended up evaluating each of them, making little marks in the totals, and then you can see programmatically across the board where as a program we stood as well as individual lessons, because some lessons there's no way you could complete all of those pieces, but different lessons had different strengths. And so is the assumption that this is a tool best used for a program or an individual lesson?
Yeah, thanks for that question, John. So John is talking about the instructional resource self-evaluation tool. And the way that basically for all 3 of the tools, we want people to use them in the way that works for them and their programs. So that's sort of my number one answer. But we did write it to sort of, our intention was that it would be used in the way that you just explained, John, which is that for the instructional resource self-evaluation tool, folks would take their individual instructional resources through the tool. So they would take, okay, this field study about macroinvertebrates, we're going to take that one through. Okay, the lyrics to our campfire songs, we're going to take those through, and any other instructional resources you might have. Okay, we have this, booklet that we use with the students, we're going to take that through. And that then once you've gone through that process for all of your individual instructional resources, you can use that report sheet, which it sounds like you did, to sort of mark all of those instructional resources on the same page so that you can start to see, okay, at the program level, where are we sort of hitting where we want to be and where are we not? Because you're totally right. There's no way to be highly effective in every single characteristic in every single activity that you do at outdoor school. There's just not enough time for that to be possible. And so we totally expect that individual resources are going to have, you know, within your full outdoor school program, you're going to have some individual activities that are, you know, really highly effective at this one thing. And that's not going to be something that you see as highly effective in a lot of your other activities. And so it's kind of for looking at both of those scales. But we encourage folks to really use it in the way that is going to help them achieve their goals. Does that help, John?
Yeah, that was how we used it. And we found it pretty effective in the programmatic at the program level of saying, as a program, we're not hitting this. Are there things that individual lessons can do to change what they're doing that would then move them up maybe in another category or two? So that was a challenge for our instructors, was to go back and look at their lessons that they saw from the tool and say, is there any way that we can help with that moving to highly effective?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I will note also that, you know, we've had multiple versions of the instructional resource self-evaluation tool. And one of our reasons for making a new version was that John and his collaborators had used it in their program, and they gave us feedback about what that process was like and which characteristics were confusing, or we weren't quite sure what to do here. And I'm sure we haven't perfectly addressed all of that feedback, but we did actually say, okay, here's this feedback that we're receiving. Let's take a look at how we can adjust the document to make sure that it's working better for people. So thanks, John, for the feedback. And just a call out to all of you, if you do use this tool and you are like, this would work better if they thought about doing it this way, please tell us. We would love to know that, so that we can update the tool, which we are constantly trying to do. And I see a question in the chat about who do we encourage to participate in the evaluation process? That's a great question. So it kind of depends which tool you're talking about. And really taking a step, you know, it's tempting to, and often easiest, to just have it be folks who are on your direct team go through that evaluation process. But we really encourage folks, when they can, to think about, okay, who are the partners that we're working with that might have some insight or a new perspective, or be important partners in what we're doing, who we can invite into this process. So that might be, you know, like parent chaperones, or it could be, if you're an outdoor school provider, it could be teachers that you work with. For the special education and accessibility tool in particular, we really encourage collaboration between school-based special education teams and the outdoor school provider, educators at the outdoor school provider, so that we can make sure that, you know, we have sort of all of those links made to make sure that students who receive special education services have everything that they deserve and have a right to have. And so that, I would say, for that tool, we in particular encourage collaboration with special education teams. But for all three tools, we encourage folks to think about, okay, who might actually be able to offer a perspective here that isn't present within our team. And so if you actually have connections and you could have students involved in the conversation, you know, I'm not suggesting that you have a 10-year-old go through the tool, but there might be some components of going through the process where you're like, it would be really interesting to hear what some students think about whether we're sort of absent, emerging, or highly effective on this particular characteristic. So make it your own, make it work for your program, and let us know, you know, how we can help and what you learn when you do it. Thanks for that question. Any other questions? And you're welcome to toss them into the chat or to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. Can OSU staff lead a self-evaluation effort? So we do not typically come in and fully facilitate your process. But if you are looking to use one of the tools and you want support, reach out to us because we can help you with the process. But as much as we can, you know, one, we want to make sure that we're keeping enough separation because we're the funding agency for outdoor school, that folks are super clear that, you know, what they are finding in their self-evaluation is not related to Measure 99 funding. It won't be used in a punitive way, but also really figuring out, okay, who on your team and who in your network do you really want involved in and leading and engaged with this work? And we can help you figure out what that process might look like. But typically we don't actually lead the evaluation for you. But we did have, you know, in 2020, we put out a call for grant applications, and one of the grants that we had available was an equity, diversity, and inclusion grant. And a lot of programs, when they applied for that grant, what they asked for was, you know, can we have a consultant come in and help us go through this process of doing that work? And so we're thinking about how we might offer some more grant programs again in the future. And so, you know, we're thinking about how we support you in doing that work. So please reach out to us if you want to talk about it. Thanks for that question, John. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give us a little tour of the self-evaluation tools website. And thanks, Kim, for noting that Dan might be able to help if you need some specific consulting, and his email address is in the chat. So thanks for that, Kim. I'm going to take us on a little tour of the self-evaluation tools website on our webpage. So let me get back here. And Rita, if you wouldn't mind repasting the link to the self-evaluation tools webpage so people have that handy. I'm going to give you a little intro overview. So, you know, from our homepage, the way you can get to this is by coming to Educator Resources and clicking right here on this self-evaluation tools button, and that will take you right to this page. It provides this overview. We have this suite of 3 tools. Here's the evaluation cycle. These tools are designed to help you move through that. And then it has sections for the 3 tools and then the glossary, which I'll show you in a moment. And so the first one up is the instructional resource self-evaluation tool. We have the link to the PDF file. We launched all of these self-evaluation tools with webinars, you know, over the last couple of years. And so you can watch the recording of that if you want a more in-depth introduction to any one particular tool. I'll come to this resource page in a second. And then we have the table portion of the tool downloadable as an Excel file. So if you want to make edits to make it better fit your program, or you want to use a digital version to sort of mark how you're qualifying different things, you can download the Excel file there. But something I will point you to is this resource page. So I'll click on the instructional resource self-evaluation tool resource page. And basically what we have here is for every characteristic in the document, we have pulled together, it's usually about 1 to 5 different resources that you can use to learn more about that particular topic. And so this can be really helpful, you know, as you're preparing to use the tool. If you know, okay, there's this characteristic in the tool that I don't even know enough about this to really be able to reflect on where our program is on this, you can come here then. Often what folks use this for is, okay, we went through this process and we identified we're gonna focus our efforts on this characteristic over the next 6 months. And they will come here and say, okay, we're gonna just start as an easy launch into that work to read the resources that are available, or watch, if they're a video, the resources that are available here on the resource page. So we have one of those for every single tool, for all 3 of the tools. And so that's the instructional resource section. We have the same 4 buttons for the cultural responsiveness one. And then for the special education and accessibility one, we also have a couple of videos that relate to special education and what sorts of things we can fund to support students with disabilities. So you can check those out. And then finally, there's a link to the glossary. And so all those words that have an asterisk next to them, in the self-evaluation tools should be showing up here on this glossary. And so with that, since I see it's 10:42, I'm going to say thank you and pop up my email address here and remind you that right after this at 11, we're having a panel where 3 programs are sharing how they've been using the tools. And so thanks so much for joining. Email me anytime, and Rita's going to paste the link to the post-session survey. So thanks so much, y'all.
And if you would go back, Christy, to the website, something that I'm getting feedback on is that some folks are not familiar with the anchor navigation. And so you might show them that we have that in place and that they can use that to get more quickly to what they're seeking.
Yep, great. So Rita is referring to this, right, Rita?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you know, okay, I want to go right to the C set, you can just press that button and it will take you down to that section. So we have that anchor nav in many parts of our website. Awesome. Thanks y'all so much. Hope to see you at 11 for the panel.